Okay, so thank you everyone for joining me this afternoon for, I think, the final session of today's virtual conference. In this session, we're joined by some great panelists, and we're here to talk about the future of digital assets. So again, I think for those of you who don't know, digital assets or cryptocurrency, specifically things like Bitcoin, has been regulated as a commodity since 2018 in Indonesia, and subsequently a framework for the technical trading and the regulation has been developed and refined further. And up to date, there's over, I think, a dozen registered exchanges in Indonesia. So the ecosystem, I think, is starting to really mature, and there's a great foundation there. And the basis of today's topic is to really discuss what does the future look like now, for example, that there's this foundation in Indonesia and elsewhere around the world. Before we get started, I want to just do a quick loop and introduce you to the panelists that we have today. So introduce you to myself. My name is Stephen Sahadi, and I'm currently one of the supervisory board members of the Indonesian Blockchain Association, atau Asosiasi Blockchain Indonesia. We're also joined by Mr. Oscar Darmawan, CEO of Indodax, which is currently Indonesia's largest exchange. Mike, who joins us, I think, from the States, so I'm not sure what hour it is for you, mate, who's the CEO of Interstellar. We have Alex as well, representative of Upbit, as well as IDCE, which is Indonesia's digital commodity exchange. Next up, we have Sagar, who heads up regulatory relations in APAC and the Middle East for Ripple. And finally, we have Jay from Luno. Before we get stuck into the questions, I think I'm going to give an opportunity for all the panelists today to run a brief video so everyone here can get a better understanding and some context as to what their individual businesses are about. So I'm handing it over to the organizer to maybe start the video.
How do we solve corruption using smart contract technology? Corruption is common and widespread in Indonesia, from bribery, extortion, embezzlement to fraud. It is observed in the highest level of government. We have too many high-profile cases involving politicians or even ministers embezzling hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayers' money. And it is also observed in our everyday life, a smaller scale of corruption, but yet it impacts the life of almost every Indonesian citizen. So how does this happen? Let's take a look at an example. Getting a land certificate in Indonesia is an arduous, lengthy, and very expensive process. This is because we have too many middlemen. You need a lawyer, you need a surveyor, and most importantly, you need to get a stamp of approval from a government's official. There is also lack of transparency in the process. And as with bureaucracy in Indonesia in general, it's still largely a traditional process that relies on tons of paperwork. All of this problem can be solved by smart contract. But first, what are smart contracts?
We all may be familiar with what a contract is. It's an agreement to do or not do something in the future within certain parameters and under certain conditions. Smart contracts bring the concept up to date. They're contracts written into lines of code and are self-executing. That's why they're smart. As such, they avoid the need for trusted and expensive intermediaries. Think about the joys of buying a new home. It's a pivotal moment for lots of people. Buying and selling a house is incredibly complex, when it should be a matter of transferring money in exchange for property if certain conditions are met. You need a lot of middlemen, from lawyers to bankers and surveyors, and will likely be faced with an extra fee or tax here and there. It's so expensive and stressful that it takes the shine out of most people's dreams of a new life. Now, imagine doing that in a foreign country. Foreign borders, foreign rules, and a whole set of other unknowns. Smart contracting relieves you of those headaches. Putting a smart contract together will help provide more transparency and efficiency. This creates more trust, and the transaction can be fulfilled without the need for intermediaries to be involved. Once a smart contract is set up, watch the process begin once all the conditions are met.
Hi, I'm Mike Kennedy, the CEO of Interstellar. First, I want to thank you for including us in the Indonesian Blockchain Conference. At Interstellar, we firmly believe in blockchain technology and digital assets as the future to a better and more inclusive world. One company we're working with to this end is Velo Labs. Together, we're working to build the world's first federated financial network. So we used Velo tokens, a bridge asset issued on the Stellar network, to allow businesses to safely and securely transfer value between each other in a fast, secure, and transparent way. An use case will be to serve partners in the remittance and money transfer markets in Southeast Asia, where we will vastly improve cross-border payments. Why we want to do this? We'll take a look at the current situation. Existing financial infrastructure, particularly that in Southeast Asia, creates a money transfer market that is fragmented and uncompetitive. This results in high transaction costs as transfer pass through multiple middlemen. Additionally, among the 650 million residents in Southeast Asia, 26% of them, or about 170 million, are still unable to access modern-day financial services. We believe blockchain technology and digital assets, aligned with regulators' requirements, are the future to solving this problem. Blockchain technology and digital assets will make international payments faster, cheaper, and overall more efficient. A key requirement to designing this type of a network is work closely with regulators from the start to make sure the network is compliant, but actually even better so, more secure and compliant than current methods. We're solving this problem by issuing bespoke digital credits on the blockchain that are tailored to suit a business's specific needs and address regulatory requirements. The Velo token will act as collateral to ensure settlement, and the Velo protocol is designed to complement and empower existing businesses and financial participants. Collaborating with these existing players is a prerequisite to success, and this is where Velo Labs has a clear advantage over most other projects. Velo Labs has already secured several key partnerships with banks, MTOs, and other financial institutions in the APAC region. These include partners such as the CP Group, Lightnet, Seven Bank, Hanwha Investment and Securities, and Seba. And this is just one example of how a future with advanced digital assets can improve financial services, making them faster, cheaper, and more accessible to millions around the globe. Thank you for including us in the conference, and I look forward to the upcoming panel.
Halo member Indodax, yuk kita pelajari apa itu aset digital. Aset digital adalah aset yang tidak memiliki fisik, yang dikunci dengan sandi-sandi kriptografi dan memiliki nilai. Aset digital ini bisa diakses selama ada koneksi internet. Proses penciptaannya dilakukan melalui proses matematika dan enkripsi yang rumit. Biasanya aset digital bersifat desentralisasi, yang mana aset digital ini tidak ada orang atau institusi yang mengatur. Aset digital mudah diakses di mana saja, dapat dikirim ke mana saja, lebih transparan dan mudah dilacak. Jadi, aset digital selain efisien, juga biaya transaksi yang murah tanpa bergantung kepada hari kerja lembaga keuangan. Miliki aset digital Anda sekarang juga di Indodax.com. Jangan lupa subscribe channel kami ya.
Good afternoon. My name is Sagar Sarvai, and I lead Ripple's regulatory and government relations for APAC. It's been more than 12 years, or close to 12 years, since the Bitcoin white paper was published. Safe to say, since then, what we have been is, we've been in part of this classic innovation cycle that has played out over the past 11 or so years. The first phase was early adoption, when we see a lot of early adopters like digital asset exchanges, companies like Ripple, and even regulators who created frameworks to encourage innovation around digital assets. Then came the phase of fear and uncertainty. And this coincided with the massive boom in the crypto prices between 2017 until early 2018. Besides the price, scams, cybersecurity hacks, digital assets being used for terrorist financing kind of owned the news. And that really triggered that fear amongst policymakers and governments when a few of them actually took the extreme step of banning cryptocurrency trading. Now, it's safe to say that we have entered the phase of maturity, or as many would call, the phase of building. This phase has been going on for the past 18 months or so. We are seeing more and more companies, incumbents, disruptors, using digital assets to solve very specific problems. We are seeing native crypto assets like XRP being used to solve problems around cross-border payments. We are seeing central bank issuing their own digital currencies, or better known as CBDCs. We are seeing big corporates issuing their own stable coins, for example, Libra, again to solve specific use cases. And then again, over the past 6 months, we have seen this big buzz around DeFi. In my mind, this creates a perfect storm for cryptocurrencies, digital assets over the next decade. And for many of you will remember, the exact innovation life cycle played out in the internet era as well. If you remember, most of the successful companies that we hear of, including the likes of Amazon, Facebook, Google, saw their peak post 1999. This was the era of dot-com bubble. Once the bubble burst, the build phase started, and you look at these companies now that have really become successful. I am very confident that this is the time for crypto. This is the most exciting time to be in the industry. A lot of creative, innovative work is going on, and I'm very confident that this will be the era of crypto. I'm Sagar Sarbai signing off, and I'm looking forward to participating in the following panel discussion, discussing the future of digital assets, and of course discussing the role that Indonesia will play in this very exciting industry. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for the introduction. I think we are ready to jump straight into the questions. So I'll fire away, and then I think we might go around the room or the virtual room, maybe starting with you, Mike, and then Sagar. The first question is, how will digital assets, in your view, impact traditional finance systems? Specifically, I think if we look at, for example, in Indonesia and globally, trends such as e-payments. So in Indonesia, we have, for example, an increasing penetration of e-wallets such as GoPay and OVO, or the equivalent of WeChat and Apple Pay. How do you see sort of the traditional system colliding with this sort of new system, and how is the digital assets world going to fundamentally impact current traditional systems?
No, that's a great question. So digital assets are going to transform traditional financial services. It'll be across a variety of different services. I think that, the first one we're focused on is more of the cross-border payments, where it will make it faster, cheaper, more secure, more compliant, etc. To your specific question in terms of some of these wallets, I think that it'll play out in the same way that a lot of other fintechs and financial services have, which is at first when they start out, everyone thinks that it's all about disintermediating the incumbents and fighting them head on and trying to take them on and create a wallet to put them out of business. And then after a little bit of time, people realize that it's actually really difficult to do. The incumbents realize that these guys actually have better products than them. Maybe they should take advantage of it. The small guys realize we have a great product, but we don't have a big customer base, whereas the incumbents have a big customer base. So I think you'll start to see, and you already are starting to see, more of the incumbents and the disruptors, as they were before, with these digital assets, cryptocurrency, etc., starting to partner together and utilize these better products, these cryptocurrency inside some of the incumbents, and it'll be a better product for everyone. It'll be a better product for each of those companies. They'll take advantage of these other strengths, but it'll also deliver better solutions into the marketplace. So that's where I see it going, is more of this co-opetition as opposed to trying to disrupt them and put the others out of business.
Wow.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Mike. And I think I just wanted to take a step back, right? When you look at digital assets, the beauty of digital assets is that it offers you trust in a trustless system. Now, in the internet era, the internet gave us the power to move data across borders seamlessly and in real time. But until blockchain digital assets were invented, you could not do that with value. Digital assets offer us that same ability to move value across borders, which is why Ripple for the past 7 years have been very focused on this problem around cross-border payments and how digital assets can be used to solve cross-border payments. And again, just to give you some context, unlike in domestic payments like Singapore, Indonesia, UK, India, most of these countries have real-time fast payment systems where you can transfer money seamlessly within the country. But if you extend that to the global scenario, there is no global central bank today, which is why this ancient system of correspondent banking was invented. And there's a huge amount of trapped liquidity in these nostro-vostro accounts. And crypto digital assets can really solve that problem. And that is where, like Interstellar and other companies, Ripple has been focused on that very specific problem for 7 years now. And I almost feel proud that over the past 18 months, we have seen so much innovation around this space that Ripple's stand almost seems vindicated, because we have been shouting from the roofs that this problem can be solved using cryptocurrencies for the past 7 years. To your second point around how this works with some of the wallet players and some of the incumbents and disruptors. And again, I would absolutely agree with Mike. In fact, I would disagree with the word that you use. You use the word collided. I would use the word collaborate. I think for a long, long time, especially in the realm of cross-border payments, one institution, i.e. SWIFT, had a monopoly for almost 40 years. From here on, I don't see there'll be a zero-sum game. There won't be one winner takes it all. There'll be different pockets. There'll be different networks. There'll be incumbents, disruptors, Ripple, Interstellar, SWIFT GPI, and financial, and you name it. And then there'll be the wallet players. And I think, and then of course, there'll be central banks launching their own central bank digital currencies. I think the game would be all about how these things come together, collaborate with each other. And I think in the grander scheme of things, the ultimate beneficiary will be the customers, especially in countries where financial inclusion is a challenge, where last mile delivery is a challenge. So I think over the next 5 to 10 years, people will see a lot of benefits coming their way.
Talking about digital asset, we can step back a bit to see what happened in the transition between like offline thing and digital thing. Like if we talk about not asset, I mean, if we talk about let's say contents, right? We can think about what happened when we had digital contents. I mean, I love musical, I love opera. So sometimes if I have a time, if there's no COVID situation, I will go to like Broadway to enjoy the musical. But nowadays, I spend more time on YouTube or Netflix because there are certain benefits of enjoying content digitally, right? So we have seen a huge change when content got digitalized. That's one thing. And second, if we talk about commerce, well, I was in internet business for last almost 20 years. And when I made such a service career, which was Naver, there was a certain concern about e-commerce. So people say that you cannot trust something sold on online. Like they used to say, how can you believe that seller is legit when they are selling online? You cannot touch it. You cannot see it. You cannot try it on. How can you buy clothing, on online? That was the sentiment at that time. But nowadays, look at it. Like we are reluctant to buy things in offline because we never know we never know if they had some custom complaint or not. So these days, digitized commerce giving people more confidence. They provide more trust. And because of that, the commerce space expanded. We talk about another theme, communication. I love talking over meeting people. I do miss meeting my colleague in Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, Korea, and here and that. I love this offline thing, but we cannot deny that majority of our communication is happening on digital way. We use Zoom, we use WhatsApp. In Korea, they use Kakao Talk, and we communicate using email or Slack. So even though there are certain beauty of offline communication, we can see that there was a massive advantage in digital communication. Well, it gives you more trust. It gives you more traceability. It gives you more reliability. And I think same thing happening on asset as well. We had a lot of asset. We had the land property, we had a car, we had the house, everything. But they had a certain lack of trust because it's offline thing because it's not traceable, because it's not recognizable by participating the participants in transparent way. So I see same transition might be happening in digital asset space. So it's not a new thing in my perspective. We already saw it in commerce, contents, and communication, and among other things. So I believe that turn offline to digital asset will expand this ecosystem in an explosive way. That is my perspective.
Moving on to you, perhaps, Jay.
All right. So sharing my perspective as an Indonesian, I have to admit that when Gojek and OVO first came into the pictures, I actually had some doubt on the feasibility of the wallet concept in the first place. Because in Indonesia, we actually are a very cash-heavy society. A lot of people don't have bank accounts. A lot of people doesn't have the credit cards, but they prefer to hold cash. So to imagine that 5 years since they beginning to introduce GoPay and OVO, now that a lot of people are using it to buy their food, to purchase everything online, it's been nothing sort of amazing, right? So I think it kind of proves that in Indonesia, people are willing to change. They're willing to adopt something new as long as it solves their problem. When we compare GoPay and OVO against the traditional cash, for example, it's very convenient. It's very practical. You don't have to carry a lot of cash in your wallet. If you want to pay something, you can just scan it over your apps. So it provides convenience and solve a lot of problems for Indonesian. So I believe we've been seeing this kind of shift in the investment side as well. So we see a lot of people starting to look at digital asset like Bitcoin or Ethereum as their way of investing, as opposed to a more traditional asset like gold or shares or government bond. It's because it's so easy to get access to this asset. You just need internet connections. You just need to register to one of the digital exchanges, and then you can start investing. So I can see that this will transform the economy of Indonesia in the futures as well.
And finally, maybe some thoughts from you, Oscar, on how digital assets will impact the current financial system.
Actually, I quite agree with everyone panelists here, but I think it will be more interesting if I give a different view. So basically, I quite agree that the digital asset will try to find a way to change how the traditional finance system. But we need to understand something, that one big barrier why in Indonesia will be harder than any other country. One of the reasons is because the framework of our Indonesia regulation. Indonesia as a government have one very big problem. We realized it when we start our company about 5 years ago. One of the biggest problem in Indonesia is whenever we create some kind of regulation, we always do over regulation. That's one of the most barrier that happen in Indonesia. Example, as we know how the crypto now being regulated in Indonesia, but in Indonesia we also always try to do over regulation compared with other country. I think every crypto player understand and agree about this. So in terms of the, if we talk about finance, traditional finance system, they even try to make the regulation more hard for the new industry to come into the traditional finance. So when we talk about e-money, when we talk about payment system, for crypto to come into that kind of space, it will be quite hard because of the limit that coming from the regulation. But I believe it's about time that eventually crypto or digital asset will find a way to transform Indonesia ecosystem in terms of traditional finance, but it may be, we can say, it will transform from the gray area first before it coming into the white area, because all industry in Indonesia is over-regulated, especially in the payment sector. So it will be harder compared with other countries, but eventually the market will win. That's what will happen, that I believe.
Great, I think that's some really good insight and perspective for anyone looking to obviously enter or do business in markets such as Indonesia, being very conscious of the opportunity, but also the very real challenges that Oscar pointed out as well. I might just quickly ask the follow-up question sort of related to this, and maybe just some quick answers around the room, maybe starting in reverse order with Oscar, then Jay. Obviously, we're seeing the trend of governments launching central bank digital currencies. I think my assumption is there's consensus around the panel that this is more of a question of when rather than if. So when central banks do start issuing central bank digital currencies, which is basically a digitized version of their currency, how do you think this will impact traditional systems? But also, do you believe it will, I guess, to a certain degree, validate what's happening in digital assets and sort of the DeFi space? Maybe starting with yourself, Oscar.
Okay, regarding the central bank issuing the digital currency, that is something that I believe is better for me not give any comment because it's not in my domain. But as we can see in the blockchain sectors now, many private sector try to digitalize the local currency. In Indonesia, we can see that quite a lot of players try to digitalize Indonesia rupiah. US dollar, we have quite a lot reputable one like USDT, USDC, and others. I believe that with more and more stable coin or digital currency, eventually it will more energize and support this ecosystem. So if you ask me about how actually this digital currency affecting the digital asset industry, I think this will bring positive impact instead of negative. Because actually the most barrier for people coming into the digital asset world is because they not really understand about the concept of digital. But if the central bank, the one who introduced about digital money, then actually one of the biggest barrier actually will be people will start to understand easier.
Cool, thank you. Jay?
Right, speaking about digital currency and central banks is always tricky, especially in Indonesia, because as we all familiar with that in Indonesia, digital currency like Bitcoins are considered as commodity instead of currency or a form of payment, right? So I don't see in the near futures that government of Indonesia will follow the same suit in issuing the digital currency. It might be an interesting possibility in the futures once majority of other countries have done it first. But yeah, I do think there are a lot of benefits for central banks to access the digital currencies. It will improve the accessibility of their currency. It will improve the money flow. However, as Oscar mentioned as well, in Indonesia, we are always limited by the current regulation. So it will be interesting to see this developing in the next couple of years, but definitely not in the next 1 year or two.
Wonderful. Alex?
In talking about digital currencies, since I'm the Indonesian, I may not know fully about central bank stance in Indo, so I don't think I'm a right person to comment about the central bank the issued currency. But generally speaking, I do see that the majority of the central banks around the world, they are exploring the option to issue a central bank backed currency, and they do have a clear reason why. They want to have a faster and efficient the payment system, and they want to have transparency as well, which And those two things are needed in Indonesian market. Well, I lived in Jakarta for 5 years, so I know some pain point of traditional finance system in Indonesia, especially those payment and transparency issues, so to speak. And also, I do believe that the widespread adoption of digital currency in Indo can benefit for Indonesia government to have more clarity or visibility in the taxable income. So I do believe that Indonesia government may have strong the motivation to at least test this idea. And well, this space is not mature yet, so there could be some hiccups here and there, but definitely I believe that this is the topic that Indonesia government may want to try, and I wish they can work together with the industry and the expertise group so that they can direct their effort in the right direction.
Thank you. Sagar?
Yeah, so I'll, again, to travel back into time, right? Over the past 4 or 5 years, a lot of central banks globally are experimenting with this. But I think it was really June of last year when the whole Libra thing was announced that really triggered the movement of central banks progressing with CBDCs. And then, of course, the China PBOC announcement that they were going to launch their own CBDC. Now, I think almost, rough stat is almost around 100 banks are in some phase or the other to experiment with this. But when I meet central banks and regulators, there are 2 questions I ask them. The first is, why do you need a CBDC? What is the use case that a CBDC will solve? So for example, in a country like Cambodia, where financial inclusion is a challenge, a CBDC may be a problem around last mile. But they also have to be very clear, because when you talk about financial inclusion, lending becomes a very important aspect. So you have to make sure that commercial banks also have a role to play. So you need to do the balancing act. Now, in a more mature market like Singapore or Hong Kong, a retail CBDC may not make sense because they already have efficient payment system, super fast real-time payment systems in place. So maybe in their case, a more wholesale CBDC may be a better thing to do. And that's exactly what Project Lion in Hong Kong, Project Ubin in Singapore, and Project Intenon in Thailand are doing. But I believe that all this will remain in the domestic context. The moment you look at cross-border, a CBDC may not solve the problem of cross-border payments. So let's say 10 years from now, if I were to look into a crystal ball and predict what will happen, again, I don't think it will be a zero-sum game. There will be room for CBDCs to collaborate and coexist with native crypto assets like Bitcoin, XRP, etc. And here, CBDCs will still need to be connected, right? When you're doing cross-border payments, so an asset like XRP that is fast and efficient can still use to connect 2 different CBDCs. So again, as I said in my earlier introduction, I don't see this as a zero-sum game. There'll be collaboration, there'll be room for coexistence, but I think regulators need to understand that they first of all need to forget about this FOMO thing, right? The fear of missing out. And they need to understand that CBDCs is not being launched to compete with crypto assets. They need to coexist and collaborate with each other, and that is what will end up happening 10 years from now. At least that's my prediction.
And finally, Mike.
Great. I agree with what a lot of people have said. I think that the CBDCs would be great for the ecosystem overall. I think it is a proof point of that blockchain and digital assets can improve upon things, specifically cross-border payments. So blockchain and digital assets can make things faster, cheaper, more efficient, improve financial inclusion. And the fact that the governments are saying, hey, we believe in this and we're going to create our own CBDC is a positive thing, showing their belief in this, as opposed to, you back up 5 years ago and 10 years ago and everyone says, oh, the only reason people are using crypto is for, the dark web or for money laundering or anything like that. So suddenly to go from that to governments saying, actually, this is a good thing and we're going to create our own version of it, shows that it actually is the opposite of that. It can provide more transparency. You can provide better AML and KYC. You can provide faster services. You can revolutionize a lot of financial services to get more inclusion. I think that's great. I think that, for people that know what's going on in the background, and I think that, we all work in financial services, so we understand what happens in the background. But, for those people, they might say, hey, this is actually, I trust this. You saw people be more engaged sometimes when you had suddenly stable coins instead of some of the crypto that was fluctuating a lot. This is taking that to the next level of saying, not only is it a stable coin that a company that maybe I've heard of, maybe I haven't heard of, has the stable coin, now it's the government that's sponsoring it. So more and more people will be more comfortable. But also you think about the vast majority of individuals and companies don't even understand whether it is, how does SWIFT work? How does correspondent banking work? How does, wires work, et cetera? What they care about is that it's a fast, secure, cheap transaction, and getting these CBDCs in there just will help to push us along in that road. And I do agree with Sagar that it's not going to eliminate other cryptocurrency or other digital assets. They will coexist. There'll still be these. And sometimes you will go straight from a USD to another currency, for example, but other times you might have a crypto in the middle that you'll go to. So it absolutely won't eliminate them, but if anything, it will just show that this is something that the governments now trust and believe in, and they're willing to create a digital token that will go across these different blockchains, as opposed to kind of saying we're uncomfortable with it, we're old school, we don't know what our regulations are going to be, but they're actually going to evolve them to adopt and embrace what could happen.
Great, thanks you. Thanks everyone. I might shift the questions a little bit and focus on the Indonesian market, and maybe these questions specifically are for Jay, Alex, and Oscar. Potentially giving insight to, obviously you guys are on the ground and running digital businesses or digital asset businesses here in Indonesia. So I guess maybe starting with you, Jay, beyond the large market size, why do you believe that Indonesia is a great market for digital asset businesses or exchanges?
Thank you. Yeah. First of all, from Luno, we are present in 40 countries. And if you look at that, we are always present in developing countries, right? Our focus has always been in the emerging countries like South Africa, Indonesia, Malaysia, Nigeria. And that is because we believe that these markets have a huge potentials. First, when we identify a market where we wanted to get involved with, we have a look at the problems that exist in the countries itself. Do they have like established financial system? How easy for the people to make investment, because a lot of people are using Bitcoins and Ethereum as a form of investment. So obviously that is the first use case that we consider. So first we look at Indonesia. Before the age of internet, when people wanted to invest on gold, for example, they have to go physically to the Antam office, which is like one of the government's agency, and then actually physically purchase the gold, right? And we have come a long way from there. And we see that Indonesian actually love investing. And that's why we believe that in Indonesia, we have a huge demand for cryptocurrency as well, because cryptocurrency offers you investment at a very, very good accessibility. You can use your phone to access your investment everywhere. And that is the starting point of why we think Indonesia is actually attractive. However, in the long term, we also have a bigger vision that blockchain in general will provide a huge impact to developing markets like Indonesia. It can solve a lot of problems, like what we have shared in the video earlier as well, especially with smart contracts. We in Luno believe in smart contracts because it can provide a very flexible solution for a lot of problems. For example, in Indonesia, we have this thing that is called bribery or corruptions, like one of the example, if we wanted to get a land certificate, sometimes if you don't pay in front, it will take you like 1 month or 2 months, to get your land certificates done. And that extend not only for land certificates. If you're getting a passport, if you're getting your Indonesian ID, you need to pay for everything. And there's a lot of lack of transparency in the system. So that can be improved with blockchains. That can be improved with smart contracts in the futures. So we actually love these kind of markets because we think that we do have a short-term goals and also long-term goals that blockchain is here to stay in Indonesia.
Okay, great. Maybe to Oscar, why do you think that Indonesia is a great market for digital asset businesses or exchanges?
Well, that's the question that actually coming to our to us as a founder of Indodax before when we start the company. First of all, we believe Indonesia is big market because we are Indonesian. That's the main important that I know, because we understand how Indonesia market is, and we can see that how in terms of not as a population, we cannot ignore it. Indonesia is half of the population in the Southeast Asia. So if we're talking about Southeast Asia, then we need talking about Indonesia market. Then let's talking about gold market. Indonesia also, people of Indonesia very like to invest on the asset that they believe on the intrinsic value. That's why Indonesia have very belief on the gold market. And we need to know that even though it looks like Bitcoin and gold is not the same, but if we understand the concept, actually Bitcoin is very similar with the gold. So that's why whenever we first time introduce Bitcoin, we always say Bitcoin is a digital gold. It's easier for Indonesia market to accept it. And that's why I believe that Indonesia will be big in the asset, digital asset industry, because actually they already understand the concept as long as they can accept the concept of the digital gold. But of course, there is challenge, as I mentioned previously in Indonesia. One of the challenges is because the regulation in Indonesia is not as friendly as other country like Japan. So Indonesia have opportunity, but also have challenge. Well, but I believe that Indonesia will be one of the biggest market of cryptocurrency in the future.
Okay, and Alex, why did, for example, Upbit decide to pursue this market? What was so attractive about it, aside from obviously the size of the market?
Well, like a lot of people ask Upbit, which country Upbit gonna expand? And as you know, we started in the Korean market, and now we are operating in Indonesia and Singapore, and we just got the, last month we got the Thailand SEC approval on operating business in Thailand. And we are quite selective in choosing which country to expand. And we choose country where there is the regulation on crypto space. So no regulation, we don't go. With regulation, we can go. But we cannot tap into every market. In that sense, I think Indonesia is sitting on fine balance. Well, there is regulation, and I share the Oscar's concern on over-regulation, but well, there is a regulation, it's a good thing, it's better than nothing, right? So at least there is a legal clarity in doing business in Indonesia. And like everyone knows, the market is big, and I knew it, and I saw it, because when I was living in Jakarta, there wasn't a Gojek, there wasn't a Grab, you know, there wasn't Tokopedia. So I saw how big a internet business can boom in Indonesia in a very short time. And I believe that there are many aspects of it. First, Indonesia now have the sizable chunk of middle class. That is one thing. And I believe that Indonesian youngsters, they are quite keen to adapt to new technology. There's another thing. And the market size is definitely giving Indonesia a balance. And well, there is a concern on over regulation, but there is a regulation at least, so that we can play with. So there's also good. And KYC AML perspective, Upbit is quite the prudent in expanding into countries where there is lack of, you know, the AML CFT the requirements. And Indonesia is the FATF observer status country. So in a way, we think it's a safe country to do business with, in a way. And all those things combined, I think Indonesia is sitting on fine balance of regulation, market opportunity, and the acceptance on digital asset business all combined. So this is making Indonesia as attractive market for Upbit.
Okay, thank you. Just maybe touching on what you said of like how we are seeing, especially in the last 5 to sort of 10 years, massive adoption, massive growth of internet companies. I think I wanted to ask Oscar specifically, because obviously Indodax is currently the largest exchange in Indonesia, and it's obviously one of the longest standing as well. Do you think that in the near future, Oscar, it's very possible that the next unicorn coming from Indonesia is a digital asset business? And more specifically, do you believe that that's going to be Indodax?
Yes, of course. Indodax, we are targeting to become unicorn since when we start the company. It's silly dream in that time. It's because in that time our transaction our volume is only 50 million rupiah per day, but we always believe that as a startup, become unicorn is one of the big dream that we need to target it. And if we see how the crypto business now that actually now move from the gray area into wet area, because the government start regulating it, even though the regulation may be not perfect, but there is regulation, as Alex said. But one thing that actually I quite regretted is even though the Ministry of Trade and Public already regulated quite well, but the other regulation like BI and OJK actually quite skeptic. So one of the challenges that we understand and we face now actually is getting related with the OJK as well, because if we're talking about unicorn, we need to get the support from all the government body. We have the support of the OJK. Actually, to make this company become unicorn, will be facing quite a lot of obstacle, especially when we're talking about unicorn and when we're talking about aiming for IPO. We believe that the permission need coming from the OJK, because that's currently the body who regulate the public company, and if the OJK not supporting the industry, it will be harder for the crypto startup to become unicorn, because the investor or the venture capital who will support the industry will see how they actually can invest in the company if there is no way for the company to really become the public company, because that's how it is, this valuation game. But well, I believe it's about time more and more government body will support this ecosystem. But if you ask me from the Indodax, yes, we have a dream to become the unicorn, and it's always good to have dream. Yeah, thank you.
Good, thank you. I think also segueing from everyone's commenting around the regulation in Indonesia and that fine balance. Alex, aside from Upbit, you're also currently leading the Bursa, or the digital commodities exchange in Indonesia, which is a required piece of the regulatory puzzle in Indonesia. This is quite, I guess, a unique and, frankly speaking, an additional layer, which most other countries, or I think all other countries, do not currently have in terms of digital asset trading or crypto trading, which Indonesia is required to have, and exchanges in Indonesia are required to sort of pass trades through. To grow the ecosystem from that perspective, how do you see that sort of playing a more conducive and growth role rather than a hindrance role in growing the ecosystem?
Well, I think this is a very interesting topic, and we can talk about this like whole day. And I do have experience talking with multiple countries' regulators, and well, like it's not only Indonesia. Each country have different idea about how to regulate digital asset, because it's new thing. I understand. Imagine that like there's a town and they had only apple and banana, right? And somebody threw them, orange, and they will discuss, is it apple or banana? So it's not easy because in government they have a regulation, and regulation they need to define the legal characteristic of certain asset if it is asset, right? So well, in Thailand, for example, they will see more like security side. In Indonesia, they think it is commodity. In Singapore, they think it's not security, it's not commodity, it's like payment token. That is what Singapore government says. So each country will have their own idea. And Indonesia, I understand that like commodity space is more developed in like they got options and futures and gold and palm oil. So they had a more developed somehow the regulatory regime on it, I believe. And since they see those digital assets as commodity, well, it is natural for them to bring in those existing framework, which was there for a long time in a commodity space, including those Bursa Berjangka or clearinghouse or those settlement and all those things, brokers and everything, right? So, well, and we all know that it does not exactly fit with our business. Well, our business, Indodax is up and running, Upbit is up and running without Bursa Berjangka and clearing. So somehow it can be seen as additional layer, and it could be true. And to be that layer is not easy as well. As we know, if you want to be exchange in Indonesia, your minimum capital should be like more than 50 billion rupiah. And if you want to be a Bursa Berjangka, it's 275 billion rupiah. I believe it's a huge money. There isn't any country asking that much capital to be the crypto asset exchanger, but I understand that given the unique the situation of Indonesia, that could be the how should I say, easiest way for Indonesia government to embrace this new ecosystem. And in a way, even though it does not perfectly fit with this industry, I think it is good to have a regulation. It's better than don't have a regulation. But down the road, I wish the regulation to be flexible so that it won't over-regulate. Well, what we see is that there should be a balance in the regulation. If you are over-regulating, then you're gonna kill domestic business and you're gonna push those investors out to illegal exchanges. Then you don't achieve the regulatory objective. So you don't get what you want, right? So starting with existing regulation around crypto space, even though it is a bit daunting, I think it's a good thing to have a regulation, but I wish Indonesia government to be flexible, and I wish them to open to talk with industry to amend the regulation in the future so that they can achieve what they want.
Great, thank you. Switching back to yourself, Mike and Sagar, like both your solutions, respective solutions, obviously have a common focus in revolutionizing payment systems. That's obviously a common goal that you guys share. I'd like to know, like, in the next 3 years, what do you think are the 3 main things that need to happen for, Stellar and XRP to respectively win in markets like Indonesia?
Great. So first of all, I would say when you say win, it's about who can, delivering, what we look at winning is delivering a great experience and a great solution to the businesses and the consumers in Indonesia and the other markets. That's how we're defining win. And I think that, to do that, you need a clear value proposition. You have to be able to have clear regulatory frameworks that you can help to continue to develop and to build upon and operate within. And really need to engage the community and make them aware of your quality standards, et cetera. And I think that we're able to do that, by engaging the community, by working with a lot of these companies that we've set up partnerships with. And I know that Ripple has done the same thing. They've got a great group of partnerships. We have partnerships with the CP Group. We have partnerships with Hanwha, with UOB, with Seven Bank, with lots of different entities throughout Southeast Asia that have, millions and millions of end users. They have, over 50 different agent networks, 7-Elevens, et cetera, that we're able to have those on-ramps and off-ramps that can deliver a great service to those customers, as well as do it in a faster, safer, more compliant way, cheaper way. And I think that that's what's going to take to deliver that better experience for them. And I think that moving from the traditional correspondent banking and SWIFT system out there to the blockchain is really what we're all trying to do. And I think that, we can all be successful, various blockchain networks, but I think that what we're doing with Velo Labs, what we're doing with LightNet, what we're doing with a number of the other partners is really going to drive significant change in Southeast Asia and make lives better for millions of people.
And Sagar, you obviously touched on earlier, you're entering sort of that phase of maturity. So I guess a bit more specifics, like what are some of maybe the 3 key things you'd like to see happen across the next 3 years for Ripple to sort of reach in terms of penetrating markets such as Southeast Asia?
Yeah, well, the simple answer would be number 1 regulation, number 2 regulation, number 3 regulation. But obviously I need to give you a better answer. So I would say obviously the most important thing, as Oscar and Mike and everyone else has touched upon, is regulation. The good news is that unlike 5 years ago where crypto used to be a bad thing, it is now more welcoming. More and more countries are implementing mature frameworks to regulating digital assets and blockchain. The narrative around blockchain good, crypto bad is now changing. Blockchain with crypto is good is the new narrative. And really, again, on the G20 side, most G20 countries, barring a few, have actually announced that they are going to implement frameworks for blockchain and digital assets. And I must congratulate Stephen, yourself, and more importantly, Oscar, for being the champions of this in Indonesia with a very complex regulatory regime. I think kudos to you guys that at least we have managed to convince Bapepti to create this framework to regulating digital assets. So as far as Ripple is concerned, look, regulation is very important, but we are very hopeful that more and more countries in the coming years will implement frameworks that both balance risk and innovation, and also are able to encourage innovation like Ripple to come in and make lives better. Number 2 is, I think, so Ripple obviously is in the B2B enterprise space. We are not customer facing. So for our partners or our banking clients or payment services clients, for them to join our network, they have to be very comfortable that their regulator will allow them to do so. And again, so not just regulatory framework, but the outlook, the broad outlook where a regulator will allow its supervised entities to use blockchain and crypto to do something meaningful. Third is the right product market fit. So as you know, countries like Indonesia are a net receive country. One of the biggest receive markets in Southeast Asia is Indonesia, along with Philippines. So there's a lot of demand coming in from the sending countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, UK, US. A lot of banks, payment providers want to send money into markets like Indonesia, Philippines, and other Southeast Asian countries. Today, they either have to rely on SWIFT, which obviously takes a lot of time, or they have their own proprietary APIs. And that is very difficult to manage because for every connection, you need a separate API. So for example, in Saudi and in UAE, every bank or payment provider is managing 100+ different APIs. So I think there's a huge demand coming in from the sending countries, but the receiving countries, again, have to be more welcoming. And the good news, at least with Ripple, is that we have now been in the business for 7 years. So we have the network advantages. We are already seeing the hockey stick take off. We are seeing an exponential growth in our network. And the beauty of the network business is that so for example, we took almost 1 year to sign our first 2 customers. It's almost akin to selling a cell phone. When you are selling the first cell phone, you always take time, but then the network growth, the network effects take place, and then you see an exponential growth. So we're already seeing that Southeast Asia is one of our biggest markets for Ripple. If I combine Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, we have the top banks on the network already. And of course, Indonesia continues to be one of our biggest focus areas. And hopefully, we'll be able to collaborate with the local companies and also BI and OJK and do something meaningful in the coming few years.
Great, thank you. We're coming up to the end of the session, but I just wanted to fire off maybe a couple of final questions. and if I could get just perhaps some shorter answers from everyone as we go around the virtual room. So first of all, there's a lot of, I guess, new investors perhaps watching this conference or the recording afterwards. And obviously, in light of COVID, with traditional markets experiencing, I guess, more volatility than they've traditionally seen, and with some investors now probably, looking to diversify their portfolio, and specifically looking to start to build personal wealth via digital assets such as Bitcoin. Going around the room, what would be each of your number one advice for new investors looking to build wealth on digital assets? I might start with you, Mike.
Unfortunately, that's an area that we can't give advice on, is investment advice.
Sure. Jay?
Sure. I think it's a very interesting year for Bitcoin and digital currency in general. So for new investors that wanted to invest in Bitcoin, you just need to look at the performance of Bitcoins during the crisis. And there is a strong argument that is actually can be considered as a safe haven asset, maybe the second best safe haven asset on top of gold. So it could be a good asset to diversify your portfolio.
Wonderful. Sagar?
I would also like to refrain from giving financial advice, but I say one thing, and this is more common sense, is that do not treat this as a get-rich-quick scheme. Do your diligence, understand the space, invest in the value or the utility of the token, and not because you think your 1 rupiah will become 1,000 rupiah in 2 days. If anyone is promising you to grow your money 100x or 10x within a week, do not listen to him or her. Do your own diligence. Do your own study and research, and then invest.
Alex?
I wish to provide the reminder or warning because we do see there's a lot of scamming activities going on this space, right? So I want to say that if someone is saying that you can get guaranteed return on investing in a crypto asset, with very high chance it could be not true. So please be wary of those scams which say that they can guarantee return. It does not exist. And when you are trading on digital asset, you need to think about what you are buying. And if you are buying speculation, then you should be careful because you are exposed to a risk to lose your asset. And if you are buying accessibility, then you may want to check the legal implication or any risk associated with the accessibility. And if you are buying a understanding on digital asset, I think it is a good idea. Well, this space is evolving, and we are seeing many new startups coming out from this industry. So I think it will be a good idea to understand this space. So that is the thing I want to mention to the investors.
Great. Pak Aftab?
I think what everyone mentioned here is already quite complete. Maybe I just put one more. Is if any of the new investor want to buy any digital asset, just remember that if you are looking for buying some kind of like a hype token or coin, normally that kind of hype only will bring you profit in the short term. You need to understand that sometimes the hype, when the hype is stopped, the token will become no value. So that's something that need to be careful of. And if you get any offer that looks like too good to be true, it's better to believe that it is not true. And if you have any doubt to buy any token, and if you don't know to buy which token is good for you, just buy Bitcoin. It's the safer digital asset. But if you really want to get rich fast or get poor fast, just buy any hype token. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. And then final question going around the room, starting with Oscar. Let's jump forward, say 3 years from now. Where do you see the world look? What does the digital asset world look like in your view 3 years from now?
I believe that in the 3 years from now, digital asset will start to really touch the payment sector. Even though in Indonesia, the payment sector still cannot be touched because of the regulation. But I believe that the ecosystem will move into that area, especially because now the ecosystem already entering the decentralized finance. If the decentralized finance is mature enough, then the next step is supposed to be in the payment. In the beginning of phase of cryptocurrency, actually, they try to entering the payment sector first, but because of quite a lot of regulation in the payment sector, that industry cannot be touched. But I believe in the next 3 years, maybe the payment sector will be the next target again. And in the next 3 years, I believe that many crypto startups will start to do IPO, and hopefully Indonesia regulation also possible to support that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Alex, in the next 3 years, how do you see the digital asset world unfolding?
I wish that there are going to be a lot of change in the regulation in the next 3 years to be more flexible and more realistic. And I wish that will help this industry to develop in the more mature stage. And in 3 years' time, I expect that by that time, majority of asset being traded will be digital asset, not analog asset. But those digital asset, I believe that it will be heavily associated with the traditional asset. So now those digital assets, majority of them are like purely digital asset, but I see more convergence between digital asset and offline asset. And we're gonna see a lot of different kind of digital asset, which is backed by or associated with the traditional asset class. And along the way, I expect that there's gonna be more collaboration between digital asset company and traditional asset company.
Okay, and maybe yourself, Jay, like in 3 years from now, you know, we're seeing, for example, the penetration of people who are traders or investors in digital assets in Indonesia is still less than about 2 to 3%, whereas in Korea, we're seeing double digits penetration. So where do you see digital assets in 3 years, and specifically maybe for the Indonesian market, what kind of penetration rate are you sort of hoping for?
Sure. So yeah, I agree. I think in 3 years, we will see a massive increase in the percentage of people that actually owns a digital asset in Indonesia. There will be several factors. First, the regulations. Now that we have several officially registered exchanges in Indonesia, it gives sense of comfort for people in Indonesia that buying Bitcoins is actually legal, you know. So a lot of people still don't know that, and they still sort of like avoid Bitcoin at any cost. I would see in 3 years this will change, and also with I foresee a huge shift in the regulation as well. Once we have more sort of like case study from other governments around the world on how they regulate Bitcoins, I believe our government would also open to changes and also consider regulation that is more realistic and applicable for the industry.
Great. Sagar?
I think this whole COVID-19 situation has triggered a massive wave of transformation from, especially in cash-dominated societies, into more digital payments. That trend is here to stay over the next 3 to 5 years. And when you combine this trend with more favorable regulations, I think crypto assets, digital assets will become more mainstream when it comes to domestic payments and or cross-border payments. Now, I don't think that cryptocurrencies will replace fiat currencies, but they will complement fiat currencies in the future, become more mainstream. We will see again different varieties of this. There'll be native crypto assets, there will be digital currencies, there'll be stable coins, there'll be CBDCs. They will all coexist and collaborate. There'll be more collaboration between industry players. And again, long story short will be the end citizen of the country gets benefited by this when all of this goes mainstream.
Great. And last of all, Mike?
Sure, I think 3 things. More awareness of the benefits, clearer regulatory frameworks, and more real-life innovations and use cases other than the ones that we're all talking about today. I think you'll see greater depth into things like trade finance, lending, loyalty, other things like that, and not just the, the bread and butter that people are talking about today.
Wonderful. I think that brings us to the end of the session. I'd like to thank everyone, possibly yourself specifically, Mike, because you're probably in the most weird time zone of us all. So thank you for everyone's time. I think for the audience who would like to get in touch, you can contact the organizer if you would like to speak with Mike and the team at Interstellar, or Sagar, the team at XRP. And if you're obviously wanting to engage with digital assets or find out more, Luno, Upbit, and Indodax are all registered with the PUBG already. So you can feel free to contact their teams or Alex, Oscar, and Jay directly. But I'd like to bring the session to a close, and thank you all very much for attending and bearing with some of my questions. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.